All right, and we're recording?
Yes.
Shall we go?
Sure.
All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday after a long weekend. Welcome to our session, Trust Issues, Information Literacy, and AI. I'm Emily Mitchell. I'm the Assistant Library Director.
And I'm Morgan Bond, the e-resources and systems librarian.
Information literacy is near and dear to our hearts as librarians, as you maybe can guess. So we thought that we would talk about AI-generated information sources and evaluating them and how to talk to students about that. So basically, at this point, AI information sources are kind of everywhere. You can't avoid them, as far as I can tell. Every time I run a Google search, it just generates things for me. Plus, there are all kinds of tools. We put some examples up there, but there are way more than that. And there are the academic AI content tools. We're going to be talking about consensus a little bit later, but there are more. They're just everywhere at this point.
And recently, AI tools have been popping up as like a test in library databases, like left and right. So,
and you will hear that we have some thoughts about that. So I'm sure that you have also heard about some of the famous AI content fails. So we thought we would share a few highlights. There was the time when ChatGPT provided lawyers with non-existent quotes and citations, and they didn't check it, and they took it to court. That was a fun time. 2023, so you're like, don't worry, that was 2 years ago. It's gotten better, right? 2024, Google's AI was telling us to eat rocks and put glue on pizza. But that's okay, that was last year. It's gotten better, right? So this month, you probably saw in the news, was it last week, the week before?
I think so, yeah.
With summer reading list, but guess what? The books don't exist.
The authors do.
The authors do. This is one of the ways that it'll psych you out. And we'll be talking about that too. It's done that to me before, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, so we kind of provided these as semi-obvious examples. But a lot of us are subject area specialist, I can speak. And so we may be able to spot issues or false information better than, say, students.
Well, and like a student hopefully knows don't eat rocks. But within the classes that they're taking, like they are a student, they don't have this knowledge already. That's why they're in the class, presumably. And so they're not going to be able to just look at an AI generated source the way that you and I can and say, no, we got to check that. To a student, this is something that's going to sound like, it sounds like it knows what it's talking about. So we're going to talk about that too.
And we've also found that, in AI articles that are written, they often contradict themselves within the same few sentences. So here's an example. I ran this a couple days ago, actually, asking about Spartan junipers and their resistance to cedar apple rust. And within the same couple sentences, it tells me that Spartan juniper isn't a thing, and then talks about Spartan apples, and then it says, yes, Spartan junipers do exist. So
it's fun. It's great. So we are librarians. We want everyone to evaluate all the sources all the time. And the SUNY Gen Ed requirements, when they updated information literacy, we're specifically looking at their second learning outcome for information literacy, where students should be able to evaluate information from a range of sources with an awareness of authority, validity, bias, and origin. So the library already had like a guide page to evaluating sources. It uses some slightly different words, but it incorporates the same concepts. So that's the QR code that's up right now. It's our evaluate your sources guide. And we're going to be kind of talking through all of that and relating it to SUNY's Gen Ed wording, and talking about what that means for evaluating AI sources and other sources a little bit.
Yeah, so generally, we're saying that AI generated sources are like any other source. So we shouldn't just take them at face value. We should evaluate them just like we would any article or book or website.
And I will add to that the good news for anyone who finds any of this complicated or confusing, whether that's you or your students, librarians are always here to help. We would love to talk to both you and your students. That would be fantastic. Also, if you have thoughts at any time, please feel free to chime in during this presentation because you may have noticed we're trying to go for conversational.
Yeah, we're not experts in this area by any means, so please chime in.
All right. So authority is a criterion for evaluation of sources that the librarians put on our guide and also that SUNY talks about in their gen ed requirements. And this is where you're thinking about like who created this information source. So who is the author and what are their credentials or expertise? Related to that also, is it okay to cite Google's AI overview or another Gen AI information source as a source? So we have an example up, which is kind of small, Googling for causes of headaches.
Yeah, we can see that one of the sources for the information is Dr. Mike. So we had questions. Who is Dr. Mike? What are his credentials? If Dr. Mike even exists. Oh, we've got
Do you want to
an echo.
mute?
I need to figure out.
Just, yeah. Oh, no, you can do it.
I can do it here.
Yep.
How?
Manish, can you mute yourself?
Here we go.
Yeah. There we go. We're all,
Ah,
we're all set.
okay.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, authority. Who is the author? What are their credentials and expertise? And this is definitely an area where an AI source falls down. Because who is the author? Well, this is a program that kind of swallowed the internet, or maybe some other sources in some cases, and now it's doing a bunch of predictive math. It's like the autocorrect on your phone on steroids. And if you read the documentation, the what is it, the user agreement that you're agreeing to when you use these things, the companies are even
We all
saying,
read those.
oh, absolutely. In my infinite free time, it's you know, I need popcorn to go with it. The companies are even saying in that, like, hey, we're not responsible for the ways it screws up. And if that doesn't say, like, not authoritative, I kind of don't know what does. What else were we going to say? Oh, yeah. So the SUNY Gen Ed requirements related to this authority concept, they also ask students to evaluate a range of sources by their origin. And so, like, what is the origin of this AI source? It doesn't have the way a book would have a publisher vouching for it, the way a journal article would have, you know, it was published in this journal, so like the journal is vouching for it. No one is vouching for this. The company has disavowed all responsibility. So I think that's.
Yeah, so we kind of likened it to Wikipedia back in the day and actually currently. So it's a great place to start with, but oftentimes we tell our students, please don't cite Wikipedia. You can use the resources that are cited there to kind of go from there and start your research.
Because I can definitely see the appeal of these sources. I run the Google search and like it just tells me the answer, or it tells me
An answer.
an
Sounds
answer,
good.
right? And it sounds so authoritative, which I think we're going to talk about more in a moment. All right, I am no longer in the right place to just hit the arrow. All right. So related to this same concept, a lot of reputable journals are putting out wording about the fact that they don't think that Gen AI sources are authoritative either. I could not find a journal that allows you to list like ChatGPT or another one of these as a co-author. And I thought that Nature's editorial policies language was actually really like, spoke to me. So I will read that. Notably, an attribution of authorship carries with it accountability for the work, which cannot be effectively applied to LLMs, LLMs being large language models. And I was just like, yep, these are not authoritative.
Yeah, and then recently there's been a whole bunch of journals putting out statements that they won't allow AI use for peer review. And that's for a variety of reasons, mainly because of privacy and confidentiality concerns. But again, I think major journals and publishers are catching on to these aren't trustworthy.
So a lot of my issues with AI sources come from this. Credibility was the next criterion that is on our library guide about evaluating sources. So really thinking about, where does your information source get its information from? Is it citing its sources or linking to them? And if it does, in the case of AI sources, did you check them? Partially because sometimes they don't exist. See further that reading list. Partially because sometimes it will cite a perfectly reasonable source, but then it will put words into the author's mouth that they didn't actually say that in that piece.
Yeah, so one of the examples that I had is I had a student come up to the research help desk a couple months ago, and they were looking at a pretty legitimate looking medical web page that made a claim, and the student said, I really want to quote this in my paper. And I said, well, they're pulling this from this other source that they're citing down below. Let's take a look at that source and find the rest of the information, the full context. And we found that even though the journal was a real journal, those authors were real authors, that article didn't exist at all. So it was pretty suspicious and looked like they'd used AI to create that web page. So
and then it ties back with the reading list. So I was saying, it also ties back to one of my early experiences playing with ChatGPT. I knew better. I knew not to ask it factual questions, but you're interacting with it and it just feels like you can ask it anything and it'll tell you. And I was looking for, I play with a bunch of musical groups. And so I was looking for, at that time, horn quartet music that was not composed by white dudes, because it's really hard to find horn music not composed by white dudes, and I would love to play more of it. And it gave me this whole, like, it was a beautiful list, and I was so excited. And it had all these composers who I'm looking up these composers, and they're real people. And I'm like, yes, this is great. But you dig further into their websites, into the websites of the publishers, and none of the pieces existed. So these are real composers, right?
Mhm.
And like, it sounded plausible. The names of the pieces were things they could have composed. But none of them existed. And then I was like, oh, right, can't trust the AI. But even like as a librarian, it drew me in and I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And then digging into it, just really not there. Yeah. Other things to look for with credibility, is it drawing logical and reasonable conclusions? Which gets back to, like, if you're teaching a course, you probably have subject expertise. Students in the course, maybe not so much, right? The whole thing with, like, hopefully they know not to eat rocks, but do they know that, whatever subject specific fact?
Yeah. And this is where we would say, students, when you're looking for resources, look to see if it's peer reviewed, which you really can't do with AI. You'd have to dig into the sources that the AI cites if it lists any citations at all.
Yeah. And I wanted to, while we're on this slide, I was digging into, with the Google's AI overview at the top of your Google results, and like, where does it get that information from? And of course it's Google, it swallowed the internet, it's trained its AI on all these available web pages. It's also training them based on your interactions with the AI overview, which I don't know how I feel about. But I thought it was really telling that Google itself has information telling us not to trust their AI overview. So here's Google's video, 5 must-knows to get started with generative AI. And we're going to skip.
AI can and will make mistakes. Generative AI is a work in progress, and it can make mistakes. It may make things up. This is known as a hallucination. Say you ask, who will be the top gymnast in 2035? The response may predict someone, even though there is no way to truly know. It may also misunderstand things. For instance, you ask for information about bats. It might tell you about the type that's used in baseball or those winged mammals that live in caves. Critically evaluate responses. Always check information that's presented as fact. When in doubt, double check it with Google search. If you see something that's not right, flag it. Many of our generative AI products have reporting tools.
So I do like that they tell you to go on and like, hey, check the sources, look for, do your lateral reading, look for other things that confirm this, which is what I would tell a student to do as a librarian. But I just thought it was interesting that Google itself, like they're pushing this thing on us. It's at the top of every search and they're like, yeah, don't really trust it. All right, I'm gonna get back to the slide. Were we gonna say anything else with that? Maybe not.
Nope. We're on to credibility.
All right. So credibility, we were already talking about credibility. Credibility continued. We've been talking about like the Google AI overview, but we mentioned in the description of the session and also kind of in passing as we've been going along, there are more like academic AI tools out there offering content. And so one that I specifically wanted to talk about was consensus, which, have you all used consensus or encountered it?
Yeah.
Some yeses and some nos. All right, so I'm going to click on consensus and we'll go there. So consensus it's actually very cool. It's searching the Semantic Scholar database, I believe, last I checked, which is a free collection of mostly scholarly and scholarly-ish resources that's available free online. Library has more and better. I'm going to put that plug there. But all these free tools or freemium tools, like they don't have access to the things the library has access to.
Yeah, we found some of the database specific tools in their language. They actually say there are only certain vendors and publishers that actually allow them to use their content. So then students are missing out on, 75% of the content on a topic.
So when you're thinking about where it gets its information from, it's usually hidden in the fine print. And who is reading the fine print? I don't have that kind of time, do you? But consensus is doing better than just like free Google content. It is slightly more scholarly than that. And you can ask it questions and it will choose its top however many sources, and then it will tell you what the consensus is on the answer to your question. What we were going to do, oh yeah.
Can AI have authority?
Can AI be an authoritative source? Sign in first, fine. And it does take a little while. But I absolutely see the appeal of this for students because you just like ask it your question and it'll come back and it'll be like 80% of these sources say yes and 10% are mixed. And then it gives you this like overview of the subject. Oops, I was scrolling. Still thinking. Yeah, that I could show the overview while it thinks. So like it's giving me this whole thing, like you have to think about credibility. You have to think about AI as a data and insight provider. Like if I were a student, this would be very, very tempting. And this is going to be probably easier to read than a lot of academic papers. Oh, and this one, it comes back and says, there aren't at least 5 papers that I found, so I can't tell you. which I like. I'm going to show some
When you
screen.
scroll down, I
Mhm.
thought when you were scrolling, it started to say. Down one a little bit more.
Keep going.
Conclusion.
Oh yeah, so this is like the example I was going to show, where it's like, I don't have enough sources to tell you, and then in the conclusion, it tells you.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
Oh, you're fine.
That's a good answer.
It is.
Yes.
Paradox here, though, because do you trust the AI source telling you that an AI source can't be an authoritative source? My brain might explode if I think through it too far. But so there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? So this is the example I was going to show. I ran a search about sunchokes. This is something that I planted in my garden. Like, are they healthy? And at the top, it tells me I need at least 5 papers to be able to answer that. And at the bottom, it tells me, why, yes, sunchokes are a healthy vegetable choice. I'm like, consistency, some problems here. But also the exact words that you use.
We started to have some fun and try to use different words, synonyms, try to put them in different orders. And we came up with different results for each time we ran this with slightly different words.
So you can see if you ask it, does exercise improve cognition, which is one of the searches that it recommended that we run. It says, yes, 85%, possibly 5%, and no, 10%. But if we change that and we say, is cognition strengthened by exercise? Yes is down to 65% now, possibly is up to 30. And like, I don't really see a change in meaning there. So if you're just taking this at face value, like this thing knows, some problems here. And then if you change your wording even farther, right? So does exercise make you smarter? Like now our meaning is a little less clear, but also I can see a student typing this. And now we've got yes, 50%, possibly 50%. And then you go all the way to like, are active people smarter? And now it's like, okay, this is
Complicated.
This is complicated. And just like something that we have observed as librarians is that students are not going to sit here and fiddle with their wording. They're going to plug in their search once and they're going to take that answer. A thing that we see in the library databases a lot is that students who are not familiar with how to choose keywords will plug in their whole question, get no results, and decide that the library doesn't have anything, or that no sources exist. Which...
Yeah. And we know it really depends on which database you're using as well. So they don't know to switch to multiple databases along with switching their keywords. So
yeah. So something like this, which is going to come back and give you this wonderful answer, kind of concerning. It does things for my perception of credibility. All right. Is there anything else we were going to say? Credibility? Nope. All right. Purpose. Oh, do we have a question? Do we have a question, or do I need to mute people?
Oh, look at you. Go want to say hi. In my favorite place.
Hey, Amy, can you mute yourself?
It's up here.
yeah, she just did.
Okay.
So for purpose, the only purpose we could really come up with concretely is to make money. So maybe not directly, and it's also really hard to find like an about page in a lot of these tools that tells you if there is another purpose. And a lot of times we see like really flashy, cool looking language. Like consensus says that it was made by the jocks in the family to help them understand scientific information. Sounds great, but then it doesn't give you any further information about, you know, what the data is being used for, why they created it, why it's still a thing. So yeah, money is kind of the main point there.
Yeah, I was just going to add, like, purpose is often where, in a human-created source, the SUNY Gen Ed requirement wants students to evaluate based on bias. And often purpose is where bias will creep in, right? If I am hardcore pro cats and I hate dogs, am I a reliable source when I'm talking about like dogs? They're just terrible, right? They can't do anything right. They're so dumb. Probably not. And obviously there are many real world examples where bias comes into things.
Yeah. And then one of our questions too, is this similar to social media algorithms? Like, are we just getting more and more of the same content that we want to see?
Right? Is this the AI companies just trying to get us glued to our screens on their site for longer? And I guess they're gonna, I mean, I haven't seen ads in the AI generated content yet.
No,
I give that a few more weeks.
but if you can't see the product, what is it? Then you are the product. Your data
Yep,
is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So evaluating AI generated sources for purpose is a little bit maybe not as useful as evaluating human generated sources for their purpose. But it is still an important thing to think about with any source. Like, what is the purpose of this? What is it trying to accomplish? Is it trying to convince me? Is it trying to sell something to me? Is it trying to steal all my data?
Probably.
All of the above, you know.
Yeah, we also had questions about, there could be bias based on the data set that's used. So again, they usually have a limited data set. What is the information that they're building or providing these answers from? So
yeah, which when you think about something like Google's AI overview, which is trained on the free internet as a whole has some things that maybe I don't feel good about the how biased they are. just a few, y'all. Never read the comments. But I'm pretty sure those comments are in the training data. So yeah. So thinking about purpose is important. Oh, I lost. Here we go. Thinking about the timeliness of a source and the appropriateness of when it was created for your information need is also important, although again, this one feels less harder to pin down with AI sources, maybe. That might be a better way of putting it than less relevant.
yeah.
In the early days of ChatGPT, you probably remember that they had trained it on data up to whatever year, and then there was a big gap in its knowledge and it didn't know anything more recent. They seem to have addressed that now. Or at least they claim they have. So it's like getting updated content to answer you with. But if you look at something like consensus, I mentioned that consensus is using this semantic scholar database, which is all stuff that's freely available. Not always, but often things that are freely available might be older. They could be open access, in which case they could be very up to date and they could be fantastic. Yeah.
We also have seen problems with, if students need current information, you can often try to put a time frame within your search or your query, but that prompt isn't always used. So they kind of ignore some of that information. You may get dates all over the place.
Yep.
Which one of the examples that I've used with students is, even with databases or regular searching for articles, date may not matter that much depending on your subject matter. Art is usually used as an example, but even there, it can be really important if we're looking at works of art that have been reattributed to women artists in recent years. So again, date may not seem that important, but it really could be important.
And similarly, if you're looking for something that was published during a specific time, because that's what you're looking for, like what were attitudes about whatever thing in this decade, era, century, I don't know. The fact that AI is kind of wishy-washy about whether it listens to you about dates is not helpful. Yeah. All right. So we said we were going to talk about how we teach students to evaluate
AI generated information sources.
Yeah.
So we would say treat AI much like any other potential source. Again, it's a great jumping off point, but it shouldn't be used and cited within research. And we also would like to tell folks to consider using a rubric to evaluate tools. So we do have an example rubric that was created by several folks within the library in 2023.
And that rubric is probably more involved than you would want to hand to an undergrad student. So it's looking at things like the purpose of the tool. It's looking about, is the company transparent about what they do with their data, right? It's thinking about where it gets its information from. Filling out this rubric for an AI information source might take you an hour or possibly more, depending on how well they've hidden the information. But I do think it's useful to read through and kind of think about all of these questions and think about how you might address them with students or what issues from it you might raise with students.
But we're
Yeah,
To kind of like add on to that, one of the things that I find really interesting about teaching information literacy is that once and this is even like pre-AI, right? Like once students realize how much work it is to evaluate sources, it's sometimes a really helpful lesson to say like, listen, if you don't want to go through and like search through Google, right? Like, or whatever, here, like go find stuff that's peer reviewed. It's like the holy grail of information literacy. Just go do that, right? Like, because doing an exercise like this with them and they realize all of the different parts and pieces that go into information literacy is sometimes like really eye-opening for them. So like, even though this might take a little while, like I could imagine that the message would still be well received, you know?
Yeah. It's a good thought.
They're like, oh, this takes so long, you know, like, why do I have to answer all these questions? And it's like, this is information literacy, is what it is.
Yeah. And that
Actually,
reminds me,
one of my notes was to say that usually I tell students all these things and I say, you know, it'll take you more time to go through all the sources that are within some AI overview than it would be to probably just go to a database, find something peer reviewed, use it.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
right? But it also reminds me of the way everyone is like, oh, research is so much easier now than it used to be, right? It used to be so hard. You had to go physically to the library and you had to print indexes and all these things. And yes, it's definitely easier to access sources now, but you didn't used to have to think about them quite so hard, right? So I can access a source in an instant, but what is it, right? I can't even tell if it's a book or a journal article, or if it is a journal article, what journal is it from, right? Is this a reputable journal that a librarian would vouch for, or is this some like weird thing that just kind of exists only on the internet and no one trusts them? So finding sources has gotten much easier in recent years, but evaluating them, I would argue, has gotten a lot harder. And so this is like one of my pet, I don't know, something I feel very strongly about is that when we're assigning research to students, we really should be, part of the grade should be about the quality of their sources. Because finding a good source, evaluating a good source, that takes a lot of time. And who's going to put in that effort if it's just like, oh, you've got 3 sources, check, you're done.
And one of the great things about having a rubric of some kind is that it kind of steps them through each piece of the process and says, you know, did you ask this? What did you find? How about this step?
Yeah. And
I would just add, as a historian, we've been asking these questions for generations. We've always asked these questions. We just now have to identify it online. And it's not just useful for students. I actually helped somebody evaluate a website about vaccines. And she thought this was valuable, and she thought this was useful. And I was like, well, who's publishing this? Who's this organization? Who did this? What research do they have? What articles are they citing? Where's this information coming from? Do you know who this person is? Do you know who that person is? And that changed her mind about the website she was looking at. And that was useful. So it's not just about our students, it's about the broader public as well.
Absolutely.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
And then getting back to rubrics, so we've been talking about this evaluative information literacy rubric for AI tools, which is kind of about figuring out if you want to use a tool, if it's appropriate for what you're doing. We also have more recently, I lost focus again. There we go. As part of the Civic Engagement Task Force this spring, that group felt it was really important to have some rubrics for related general education core competencies. And one of the related ones, information literacy, as you were saying, very important for the public. For civic engagement, for civic discourse, like you've got to be able to find and evaluate information to be able to participate as a citizen or a resident even. So anyway, created this rubric, which is a little bit more something that might be useful in evaluating student work if you're looking for inspiration to base a rubric off of. And there's more to it than I'm showing here because it was written to meet all of the SUNY Gen Ed information literacy learning outcomes. But in particular, thinking about this evaluation piece, like what does it mean to meet the criteria for your source having authority? What does it mean to meet the criteria for your source having validity? And so these may not be perfect for your need, but my hope with this rubric was really that it could be a jumping off point and help you to think about like, what would that look like in my discipline? And so authority, validity, it's got bias, it's got origin. So this exists, and I'm going to show you where it lives on the library's website. It is also included in the Civic Engagement Task Force report that went to FA in April. Yeah. So library resources that can help. We've been talking a lot in the language of this Evaluate Your Sources guide, which I realize I don't think I clicked on at the beginning to show you all. So this is a library page that exists, or a set of pages, and it is something that you could send students to if you thought it would be helpful to them.
We actually really recommend sharing it with students because if someone doesn't share it with them, they most likely won't stumble on this.
True. But it breaks down authoritative words. It breaks down words. Authority, credibility, purpose, and timeliness. If you go to each one, it's going to like talk about what questions to ask. It's going to have examples. What makes the author an expert on this topic? Do they have relevant educational background or lived experience? All kinds of good stuff.
And this is all really created for print, but as we've just kind of gone through, this is really applicable to AI sources as well.
Very much so. We also have a library guide to generative AI, which is less about evaluating these as sources, but if you're looking for more about, I'm still trying to keep track of what's going on with AI at SUNY Oswego and at the SUNY level, and beyond if I kept scrolling, which I'm gonna skip, but also like ethical issues around AI, ways that you could use it if and when you determine that it's appropriate to use it. So this exists. And then the final library guide that we're recommending today is the Integrating Information Literacy into Your Courses guide, which is where you'll find the rubric that I was talking about a moment ago. So if you are looking for that information literacy rubric to help you figure out how you want to assess something, it's under Assignments, Assessments. And it's this top one information literacy rubric. And I am going to be updating this PDF later today because it is not as accessible as I would like. But I wanted to get it on there before we did this session because, as I say at the top of this page, don't reinvent the wheel. Please do not spend your infinite free time beating your head against a wall trying to figure out how to assess this stuff. When librarians have already thought about it, we've got some starting points for you. We would love to talk about it with you. If you have specific questions or aren't sure how to apply something to your subject area. Yeah.
So happy to do a session with your students too, activity, whether you know, it's a hands-on activity, or if you just want a lecture style.
Absolutely. And I think at this point, yes, I can say all of our librarians are willing to teach at least a little bit with AI. We are not willing to be the ones that teach your students what AI is. So I am not going to be their introduction to ChatGPT, but if you've already been doing stuff with AI in the class and you want a librarian to come in and talk about, like, here's how this applies to information literacy or to research. Quite a few of us have already done this, and I think any of us would be willing to.
Yep.
All right. So at this point, we figured we would throw it up open to questions and discussion. So I guess anything we can answer right off the bat?
I don't know if it's a question, but I think, I don't know, just all the stuff that's on the internet, sometimes when I go trying to look up information, I think it might be like even harder now to know, you know, like what the answer is, because you're getting, you know, different answers from different sources, and sometimes I wish like, oh, I wish this wasn't all there, so I could just look at, you know, like the reputable ones, like for example, medical stuff, like, you know, like Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic is usually like pretty good, but then I don't know, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And it just gets worse as AI keeps building off of itself and other
Yeah.
tools, so.
And I think just in response to your question, I think you can turn off the overview on Google.
So
Right?
supposedly you
I got very
can.
excited when I heard about that I could turn it off.
My home laptop asked me if I wanted to turn off my Gemini AI, and I said
Really?
yes.
Okay, so there's gotta be a way to do it.
I don't know if it lasts for.
So supposedly you can type -AI, but I've also heard that that stopped working.
Oh.
Well,
What is
it
that?
may have, because that's not the AI overview. That's just like a
just the actual
recommended
just
answer.
But
So
it's different for every single tool and every single platform. So.
Right. And also, oh yeah, here's the AI overview. So it does seem to work. You have to remember to type it though, which is my problem. Because I'm like, I'm not going to waste that energy running that AI query. I'm
Right.
going to save the planet. And then I forget to type it every single time.
Okay. So there's a way to do it.
There is a way to do it. You have to remember. I have heard of, like, there are directions out there if you want to write your own custom search bar for your browser, and it'll like add something to the URL that will do it for you.
Mhm.
But you have to have the time and technical ability to do that.
Right.
I've also heard people just like give up on Google and go to DuckDuckGo. They're stealing less of your data anyway. And with DuckDuckGo, I know that you can just say once, like, no, don't show me the AI overview, and then you're done.
Does DuckDuckGo have something like Google Scholar?
Not that I'm aware of.
Duck, Google's like
Hmm.
Scholar?
DuckDuck Scholar would be amazing.
Scholar, I know.
I'm not aware of one now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
use Mozilla Firefox as my browser and DuckDuckGo as my search engine,
Really,
Mhm.
okay.
generally speaking.
Mhm.
There's also a web browser. I've seen an extension called Hi Google AI.
Ooh,
that you
okay.
Can add to,
Oh.
unless that's been,
Right. It's all constantly evolving. And part of me, like, I have strong feelings about wasting all of the energy for these data centers that are, right? But part of me is like, I need to know what they're doing because I need to be prepared for what students are seeing.
Right.
And so I'm very conflicted about how I run my web searches right now.
And then if we're asking students to try these things out as a way of learning about them, then we're also expending more energy. So it's
Right.
It's
Yep.
You're kind of.
Yeah, I don't know a perfect answer. I don't know if there is one.
Usually not.
So yeah, I don't know. Have you all been encountering, have students been already using these? Are they treating them as like authoritative sources?
Are you asking if students are using AI or?
Specifically the like using it as a source to cite, because there are ways to use it that are different.
No, my experience has been that students are using it and trying to hide it as their source.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, I just
Again,
feel like,
yeah,
there, even if I'm going to require that they reveal their sources, the challenge as a professor is if I have 30, 40, 50 final papers across 3 courses, I find I'm having to put their sources in and to do this, to assess whether they're real, and literally running out of time on grading. Like, and I run them through AI checkers, whatever's the ranked the most effective at that moment in that semester. But the one I used this semester finds everything that has gone through Grammarly, and I don't have a problem with Grammarly.
right.
And when I paid to subscribe to it, because how many words I have to put through, it offered me like, great, now I can help you humanize your writing. And I realized that it's not really meant for me. It's meant for students to run it through and then be like, oh, okay, you found it, humanize it. So yeah, I think that this has been really valuable. I'm hoping that by doing some of the exercises of making them go through verifying their sources, that it would encourage them to just go to the Penfield database, the macro one, and just start there and use the database links. It's so much easier. So I'm going to go with that strategy next semester of trying to show them, look, this could all be easier for you if you do it this way. That's my hope.
Yeah, I also think, I don't know if all of the citation styles have caught up with it yet, but I think increasingly like there needs to be some kind of a URL associated with each citation so that someone checking it can just click and like, do you pull up a real source or do you not?
That's an excellent point. I'm adding that to the syllabus.
It's all the work smarter, not harder.
I was wondering if for that purpose, digital object identification links would work, DOI, because in regular papers as we write now, every source needs to have a DOI provided.
Yeah, and that could work for the scholarly sources. But depending on what kinds of sources you allow and are appropriate for your project, there are definitely sources out there that don't have the DOIs. And I actually had a student recently who was very confused about DOIs. They thought they had to like generate a DOI for a source. And then I was trying to explain to them, no, like it's usually made by the publisher. It might not have one. So then it's a whole other thing that you have to explain to them. But I know if you try to pull something from the library databases, there's always a way to get a permanent link to that. You might have to go over it with students or have a librarian do it. With things from the web, just grab the URL. And then it's just a matter of clicking on it. Well, maybe not just, but it's still less work than it would be if you had to hunt it down completely from scratch.
That's to Amy's point also, one of the reasons why I started redesigning my writing courses, and now, I make students turn in their bibliography like before they write the paper, so that, and I tell them, like, you are being graded on this based on whether or not your sources are credible, and that's the whole criteria. And it does, like when Amy was talking about how long it takes forever to go through and verify sources. But I have found that like making that a separate assignment before the actual paper has ultimately saves me time, right? Because and then they know, and they tend to be much more thoughtful about which sources they're choosing, because they know, you know, like, okay, you need 4 sources. I'm literally clicking on every single link. I'm looking at everything, you know, and that has been helpful. But it still is incredibly time consuming.
Yeah, and as an added bonus, if you make them turn in the list of sources ahead of time, they might have time to get things through interlibrary loan.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I have written my paper already and I need sources supporting it, which is my favorite. Or slightly better, but still not great. I'm writing my paper, it's due at midnight. I need 3 sources.
Well, I made my senior seminar people write an annotated bibliography, which is old school.
Even better.
But they had, they had to produce an annotated bibliography about how it was useful, and the only way to do it is that they read the actual sources. And
Wow.
maybe like 3 lines, but.
Use AI for that too, but.
I was gonna say that.
I had an oral presentation about it.
Okay,
And they had
nice.
to answer questions, so
Very
yeah,
nice.
I'm covering all my bases here.
Yeah.
I
Someone
was
was
gonna say,
trying.
I've also had greater success when I actually assign how to use AI in an assignment, and having them use it, turn in like that piece as a step in an assignment, that leads them then to, I give them legitimate archival sources, etc., to explore what they've done. But it just feels like a form of jujitsu, you know, where you're trying to take the energy of the AI and turn it back on itself or something. I realize that teaching has changed, and I think that's fundamentally, you know, I feel like I'm playing catch up with the old form of teaching with information sources. And I'm trying really hard by, you know, listening to all these suggestions to figure out how to work with the future rather than try to keep verifying the past, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I will reiterate that as you're thinking about those things, librarians would love to help you think through them. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are actually past time. So I'm guessing you're coming over here to stop the recording?
Yes.
All right. So thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.